Hello and welcome back. So in the last video we created this Nexus type thing, and when you click on it, it creates this ring. So in this episode we're going to right click to deselect, and we're also going to create some camera movement functionality. So I'm just going to go into my update in the selectable actor script, and if input.get button, and we might as well do get button down, fire 2. So this is a virtual button set up by default in Unity. So if you go into Edit and Project Settings, Input, that'll bring this up in the inspector, and you can see we have all these default virtual buttons. Fire 2 corresponds to I thought it would be more apparent by clicking on this. Oh, maybe it's up here. Fire 2 corresponds to mouse 1. So left click is mouse 0, right click is mouse 1, and if you click the mouse wheel, that's mouse 3. So we're going to use this Fire 2 virtual button, and when that happens, we're just going to deselect this guy. So we're going to call the deselect method, and at some point we're going to have a singleton being used for the menu on the right, and so we also need to notify that guy. Because if the menu is showing build options for the Nexus, when we right click to deselect, it also needs to update the menu. So for now we can left click, and right clicking doesn't do anything. And that's surprising. Print deselect. So it is calling that method, but it's not deactivating the ring. Oh, and that's because we're trying to modify the prefab instead of the instance. Alright, so now I'm left clicking on it, it's not doing anything. Oh, and so when we click on it, if it's null, we create it. If it does exist, if it already exists, we probably have it deactivated, so we just need to reactivate it. There we go. And weirdly enough, when I had my select ring prefab here, when I set that to deactivate, it actually completely deactivated our prefab. So when we hit play, left click, it's not doing anything. Well, that's because it's creating a deactivated game object, which is kind of funny. So set that back to active, and now the very first time we click on it, we get the ring. All right. So what now? Why don't we create a second object? Because I want to wrap up the selection before we move on, just because it's fresh in our minds. So I created this cube. Why don't we scale this up to like 10? And the scale of everything in this game is going to be huge, because that's the size that a person would be. And so, like, if the camera's out here, we don't want anything to ever be that small. So I didn't scale everything very well. I probably should have kept everything a little bit smaller, but that's fine. We can work with it. It's a game jam, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So why don't we make this a ship? So I'm going to add a selectable actor script here, and we're going to change its type to unit. And for the selection prefab, make sure we're in our prefabs folder, grab this selection ring and drop it on here. Ring scale, why don't we say well, what do we say here? The scale of this is 10. The ring scale ended up being 20. I think I'll just do 5 and 5 for this one. Alright, and that worked pretty well. So when we clicked on him, he gets that ring. We want the ring to show up on the ground though. And I think that we might as well just create the ship now. So new. And what we're going to do is keep the origin at the center. So the origin of the ship is going to be on the ground. And then we're just going to move everything else up so the ship is flying. And I want to mirror it on the y-axis. So the green is the y-axis. We're just going to take these points and delete them. And let's see. The front of the ship is going to be facing in the negative y direction. So this is the right half of the ship. Add a mirror modifier. And now anything we do to the right half will be mirrored across to the left half. Alright, and that'll be fine as a prototype. So, and before I save, I'm actually just going to tab back into object mode. RX minus 90, Control A, rotation and scale, RX 90, and save as Reaper 1. And I think I'm just going to delete this cube actually. Go to models, drop in Reaper 1, drag him into prefabs, and I think I will scale this up by maybe 1.5. Or 2. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And why don't we just see what 3 looks like? Even better. No, actually, yeah, that'll be fine. 2.5. Okay, so now, once again, we have to add the select script. This is a unit. We're going to take this selection ring scale, set that to 5 again, apply, and select. And we got an error. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. In select ring instance. Okay, so we when we tried to select it, it does not have a collider, so we were not able to select it. And then when we right-clicked, we tried to deactivate the ring, but the ring hadn't actually been created yet, so it gave us an error. To avoid the error, we can just say if select ring instance, like that. So if it doesn't exist, we just skip this line. And let's make sure that works. Right-click, no errors. Okay, we're good. I still can't left-click on it because it doesn't have a collider. So I'm going to click on my model and make sure that Generate Colliders is selected. And I'm trying to click on it, it's not doing anything. Does it have a collider? No. And that's because when we created the prefab, we lost our connection to the original Reaper here. So let's just add a collider to this. And we're going to do Mesh Collider. And it automatically found the mesh. Sadly, I did it in play mode, so it got lost. So let's try that one more time. Mesh Collider. Alright, so now when we select it, it creates the ring. And I think that needs to be higher. So let's just pull the whole thing up a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so why don't we create some materials? So I'll create a folder called materials and a folder called clean. And so any materials in this clean folder are just going to be solid colors. And I think that actually looks really cool. I think that, let's go to selection ring. We selected rotate degrees per second, and we chose world space. So it should be rotating around the y-axis in world space. It is still rotating in local space, which is kind of irritating. Um, and I don't have any idea why that would be. Transform.rotate. I mean, maybe they want us to set it world in both. Alright, so why don't we try this again? I mean, it looked really cool rotating in world space. I mean, in local space, but it's not what we... I mean, it would be nice to have control over that. It's still going in local space, which is irritating. But I guess that's fine. And I'll create one more material and just call this selector. And we'll make it bright orange. And I'm even going to give it an orange emissive value. Emissive. Can't talk today. An orange emissive value. Put that on the prefab. It would be nice if we could actually see it at the same time. Put that on the prefab and apply. And delete. Yep. Looks pretty good. So we can select our objects. We need to be able to move the units. And we want the menu to show up. And we also want to be able to move the camera. I think also when I hit H, I want the camera to return to the initial view. So let's create a new script. And we'll call this camera control. Drop that on the camera. And we're going to have a private vector3 initial position. Alright, so what that does is we have this private vector. It's not going to be visible in the inspector. It's only local to this script. So we don't care what it is. We just, when the game starts, we just grab the camera position. If the player hits H, we return the camera to that initial position. We can't test it yet because the camera is always in the same position. So why don't we look into moving the camera. I'd like the camera to move when the user goes to the edge of the screen with the mouse. So we need to calculate where that will be. If mouse.position, input.mouse the current mouse position in pixel coordinates. Alright, and so pixel coordinates is different than screen space coordinates, weirdly. Pixel coordinates start up here, so this is 0, 0, and screen space coordinates start down here. We're using pixel coordinates, so if it's below like 0.1 of the size of the screen, so like we can calculate the height, right? So this is, let's say this is 800 pixels. If we multiply that by 0.1, that'll give us maybe like 40 pixels. I guess that would be 80 pixels. So if we're within the top 80 pixels, we want the camera to move up. So we're just going to check that. So if input dot mouse position, and that is not a method, that's just a property. And we'll say less than screen height. And let's just come up with a ratio here. So we can say like public float padding ratio equals 0.05. So if the mouse is in the top 5% of the screen, move up. Oh, and this should be .y. Oh, how about that? So I guess these also start at the bottom. Why don't we print the mouse position? Okay, so I was wrong about the coordinates. So this is the starting point. This is 0, 0, and this is the highest point. So x goes up in this direction, y goes up in this direction. So if we're in the bottom, we want to move down. Otherwise, if we're in the top 10%, and to find the top 10%, we'll just subtract padding ratio from 1. So if the ratio is 0.5, then this will be 0.95, and we'll be looking at the top 95 to 100%. And we can stop printing this. Alright, so now, as we pass this point, it tries to move up. And we're just going to do the same thing for the x. Now we are looking directly forward in the Z direction, I believe. Yeah, so we're like whether it's yeah, so in global mode you can see the Z axis goes directly out forward from the camera. So when we want to move right, we can just move directly right in world coordinates because the camera is never going to rotate. So that makes this significantly easier. If the camera was rotating, you would probably want to move right relative to where the camera is, and then that would add more complexity when you try to move forward and backward because forward from the camera would probably be like down, and so we don't have to worry about any of that math. We can just go directly forward, directly right, directly backward, etc. So we're going to want a move speed. Public float move speed. And by default, I'll set that to like 5, I don't know. So when we want to move down, we'll say transform.translate. And move by the translation amount, which will be vector3 dot back times move speed. And then I guess we should also say by time.delta time. And that's just going to normalize it. So update is happening every single frame. And so if you have a really, really fast frame rate or a really, really slow frame rate, essentially this cancels out the difference in frame rates. So no matter what computer you play this on, you'll always move at the same speed. And here we have vector3 dot forward, vector3 dot left, and vector3 dot right. And surprisingly, left and right work fine. I thought that vector3 dot forward would be in world space. Oh, is that what I want? Dot. And we just need to make sure that the forward and backward are in world space. There we go. And I want to make that significantly faster. So if we set this here, we could set it to like 15. And that's actually not going to update this value. Once it's been serialized in the inspector, you have to modify it here. Whatever you do here, that's basically just going to be the default value for that variable. So if I set this to 25, if I added this script to a new game object, it would get this default value. But once we've changed it here, it's only going to use this value. So let's set that to 25. And it seems kind of slow. It also seems like we should probably multiply it based on how close they are to the edge. Like if they're here, maybe move really slow, and then if they're all the way out, move faster. So how can we do that? All right, so this is our screen. Let's say this is our mouse and it's right here versus right here. This is our padding. So this one is like right on the edge where it's just in the top 5%, and then this one is in the top like 0%. You know, I just thought of a really easy way to do this. Alright, so now when we're in the bottom 5%, it just moves at half of move speed, and then when we're in the bottom 2.5%, it moves at 1.5 times move speed. So really slow, really fast. There's not much of a middle ground, and we could create a middle ground. But I think this is fine. Alright, so basically we move the camera by move speed over 2 when we are in this 5%, right? And then when we're in the like when we're in the half, like whatever half of this amount is. So like let's say we start searching here. Once we get to here, now we're in the double speed mode. And this is actually applying 1.5 times the move speed plus half of the move speed. So it's actually doubling whatever move speed is. So yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. This is a game jam after all, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But now we have camera movement. We can select different objects. We want to deselect other game objects. Like if I have this one selected, and then a left click on this one should become deselected. But we'll do that in the next video. So for now, I think this is fine. So I'm going to stop the video here, and I'll pick up in the next episode.